Where do I start? This is a story that goes back nearly 40 years. It has been on simmer for the best part of them 40 years. May I introduce myself? My name is Terry Marsh, one of the protagonists of this story, and I identify Frank Warren, the well-known boxing promoter, as the other. Back then, I was a boxer. Frank Warren was my manager. He also doubled up as the promoter for many of the fights I had. It was a common practice back in the day. Some years later, a court argued that the manager-promoter agreement was vulnerable, given the potential conflict of interest created by promoting a managed boxer. The court referred to an agreement which permits contemporaneous promotion and management as a very strange animal indeed. My final contest was a world title defence at the Royal Albert Hall on the 1st of July 1987. Maggie Thatcher was still the Prime Minister and a young Mike Tyson was the world heavyweight boxing champion. And we fast forward some 35 years, and Frank Warren, in his relatively recent published autobiography, Frank and Fearless, wrote, referring to the aforementioned title fight at the Albert Hall, the following: I had no clue it would turn out to be his last fight. Frank and Fearless? Really? More like Pinocchio and pointless, if you ask me. Either Mr. Warren had a massive memory failure or the ghostwriter has made it up. What is funny is that between the two of them, they have the audacity to call me a fantasist. You couldn't make it up. When I wrote and published my autobiography, unlike Frank, I didn't have the luxury of a ghostwriter. Before I'd even received my full entitlement of wages for that said fight, Frank's view of me had changed, and you could say I was shortchanged. I would state my honestly held belief, it would get published, and the publisher would be sued by Frank Warren. Frank refers to 2 out-of-court settlements of £40,000 on the part of the Sun newspaper and an out-of-court settlement unspecified on the part of the Daily Express, as if these were arbiters of truth and accuracy and there was his justification. It wasn't long before my stated position was suppressed and I no longer had a platform in the media that could afford the libel risks, assuming of course they were interested, which they probably weren't. Terry who, I hear you say. However, it looked like a trap was being set up. I could not categorically say that was the case, but it seemed to me like a trap. It smelt like a trap. It walked like a trap. And mixing my metaphors, ducks were lined up. So it is often said, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Well, this fool found himself being sued by Frank Warren for libel. I'm tempted to cut a long story short, but that is not always a wise move when it comes to legal matters. So I refer you to the link below. www.5rb, that's Romeo Bravo.com. That would also be in the link. A legal report stated the following. On the 30th of October 1992, the facts of the matter were: the issue was, were the words defamatory? Number 1. 2. Were the words true? And 3. Had Warren consented to the publication complained of? And if so, was this a good defence to the claim? The judge would dismiss the claim. Warren was found by the jury to have agreed to the broadcast being made. His consent was a defence available to Marsh to the claim, and the jury found the words were defamatory. No verdict on whether the words were true or false. The jury split 6-6, and 3, Warren had consented to the broadcast. The defence of justification was unresolved. Having decided that consent was a valid defence, the defence of justification became an academic exercise. To quote Frank from his book, and I do, to cut a long story short, the jury decided that although the TV interview was clearly defamatory, I'd effectively given my consent for it to be broadcast by saying to Trevor that he could run it if he wanted to. Trevor and Frank, from my perspective, were a double act. Yet, what is interesting, as a result of cutting a long story short, Frank neglected to make the point that the jury was split. couldn't agree regarding the veracity. There was no verdict on whether the words were true or not. It would only be clearly defamatory if it wasn't true. The jury were undecided upon the veracity of us both. Cutting this long story short, once again raises the question for both Mr. Warren and the ghostwriter. Was it an oversight or disingenuous? There certainly appears to be a pattern developing when it comes to the book's interactions regarding myself and the author. It appears neither frank or fearless. Another example in the book is page 268. It states, I never tried to convince a boxer to fight if he was injured in any way. That had been the whole essence of my beef with Marsh, who lied through his teeth by claiming I'd known he was epileptic and later applied to have his boxing licence. That was not the view of the jury at the libel trial. May I remind Frank that the jury was split. So once again, I don't know whether this obfuscation is down to Mr. Viner, the ghostwriter, or Mr. Warren. Could they be severally liable? Who knows? This book only came to my attention as recently as October 2024. My partner had bought me the book as something to read while on a forthcoming holiday. It was over a year after publication, so any plan to sue was out of time regarding defamation claims. A case could be made that the initial publication was sold on pre-orders and the subsequent delivery was a year or so later, which would have accounted for the discrepancy between the de jure publication and the de facto publication. However, I'm not going to allow the book and its lies to go unchallenged, so I'm lining up the ducks for the Warren v Marsh rematch. This time, there will not be an issue on whether or not consent was given. It will be a simple issue of who the jury are going to believe. My defence will be one of justification. No mainstream media or social media platform have both the money and balls to allow me to say what I've just said on their respective programmes or platforms. Those that have the money don't have the balls, and those that have the balls don't have the money. I understand that they fear litigation from Frank Warren. Therefore, welcome to my platform. I ask anyone who is watching this to share this with the rest of the boxing community and anyone who believes in the right to reply. This is my reply to Frank and Fearless. If the numbers subscribing are small, it is likely Frank Warren will not get wind of this and plead ignorance to the gauntlet I'm throwing down to him. Just like I never got wind of his autobiography, I don't want Fearless Frank to be out of time when it comes to suing me like I was deprived of suing him and his publishers. I don't think when push comes to shove, Frank is as fearless as he claims to be, so please both share and subscribe and make the numbers force these other platforms to grow a pair. While here, I'm going to make an unashamed plug for my autobiography, Undefeated. I need the extra cash to help feed the war chest needed for the legal battle that awaits. Should Mr. Warren's solicitors wish to serve a writ, I can be contacted on the following email address, harryterms@hotmail.co.uk. I'll put it in the link. More to follow as and when, so please subscribe to keep in touch. You are unlikely to get it on mainstream media. Have a good day. Ciao.